Is it possible to have Docker running inside of VMware? I run VMware Workstation for my dev needs and have to maintain different VMS for diff environments. Docker seems to allow running diff environments in containers, therefore. Inside of my Windows 10 x64 VM can I run Docker and use different images and containers to develop, build and test my code. Remember, I'm running my dev environment in VMware Workstation while Docker uses VirtualBox. How do I ship/take this my app, code plus database plus web API plus, to production? Does the production machine need to run Docker? Well, please help clarify. Update. By VMware I mean VMware Workstation Pro.
Yes, it's entirely possible to run Docker in a Linux VM. Docker is a light virtualization solution. It doesn't virtualize hardware, so you won't be affected by problems typical for nested VMS. Port binding may be a bit tricky though, because you'll have to somehow connect your dev end VM in VMware with Docker VM in VirtualBox. You may also run into problems if you want to expose hosts folders to a service in a Docker container. Windows file systems are limited compared to Linux ones in terms of permission granularity, and some services don't like that. This issue is not Docker specific. In general, your app isn't locked to Docker in production. Dockerized services communicate with the world through network, no different than what regular services usually do. However, an app designed with Docker, or, more generally, cloud, in mind may be more resilient to failures and easier to maintain. VMS with Windows guests may not work, because Docker on Windows uses virtualization to host another Linux VM. Nested virtualization is not officially supported.
This blog talks about exactly how to use Docker on Windows with VMware Workstation. You can even use Windows 7. This URL. First, install the Chocolatey Package Manager for Windows. This is a one-line command. Then install Docker to use VMware Workstation. Create a default VM. Set your environment variables. Now you are all set to get started.
Yes, you can run Docker on Windows. Windows on VMware also works. We run Docker on Linux servers on VMware. The smartest would be to have Docker on your production machine also, but it would be possible to copy your data out from the containers. I don't recommend that though. You can use Docker Save to save your Docker images to files. I think it's worth mentioning that it's not recommended running several applications inside the same container, and it's not recommended to store data inside your containers. You should use volumes for that.
There is a major difference between the Docker host, Linux or Windows. The Linux host does not need any virtualization technology, so in VMware Workstation, you can install a standard Linux, then the Docker engine and run any containers without problems. The Windows host has a different requirement, because under the hood, it creates an Hyper-V Linux VM, details in this URL. So on the Windows Docker host in a VMware Workstation, on your physical Windows, you have a nested Hyper-V Linux VM. That's not a big issue. Just be careful to enable nested virtualization. Francois.
If you want to support the channel, please consider subscribing.